The customer is still always right, and Costco just proved it. We'll look at that and Little's cutting of 3% of state agencies, minus the one that is the biggest. Muslims march through Boise, and Risch pushes for accountability for the Federal Reserve. This is the Yokel Idaho Midweek Report. We're giving you an overview of the news you need to know in Idaho for the last week. Did you know that the A10s are being put into retirement? If not, stay with us to find out where one of them is going to rest here in Idaho. To get full coverage on these important stories that we're about to talk about, and ensure that you're the most informed Idahoan in the room, hit the subscribe and like button so you can stay connected with us. Let's dive into our first story. As we set up at the top, the customer is always right. And in America, 50% of them are Christians with hopefully Christian values. And we've seen with this recent story that they can make a real difference in the marketplace, and this story proves it. Inspire Investing, you may or may not have heard of them, a Meridian-based investment firm, just scored a major victory against Costco. The retail giant decided not to sell mifepristone, the abortion drug, after months of pressure from the local Christian investment company. Costco claims they made this choice because consumers weren't asking for the drug. But let's be honest, if the demand was really that low, why wait until months after investors pressured them to make this call? The timing tells the real story, we think. Inspire, for their part, isn't your typical investment firm. They create biblically responsible, end quote, portfolios that actually rate companies based on how well they align with Christian values. When they learned Costco might start selling this drug, they didn't stay quiet. They reached out, applying pressure and even threatening to file a shareholder resolution. CEO Robert Netzley calls this a, quote, massive win, end quote, and he's right. This shows that when we vote with our dollars and speak up for our beliefs, companies will/have to listen. Our dollars have power, and firms like Inspire are helping us use that power to protect life and promote biblical values in the business world. Sometimes standing firm really does pay off. And speaking of paying money, and hopefully doing it responsibly, Governor Little signed an executive order last Friday requiring all state agencies to cut spending by 3%. The key caveat being, though, he exempted K-12 schools. More on that as we go. The executive order requires agencies to review operations for consolidation opportunities, eliminating positions vacant for more than 6 months, so if you don't need them technically filled, maybe they shouldn't be there. Also, reducing contract costs, streamlining boards and commissions, and limiting state travel when it really isn't necessary. You can just do that over a call. These cuts must be completed by June 30th of 2026. Now, this is where we get into the puzzle. Little excluded K-12 education, which might not sound like much, but it consumes about $4.4 billion. That's 31.7% of our state's budget, and nearly half the total spending that the state does. If the governor is so focused, as he wants to be, optically, on having the right size government, shouldn't we examine our largest expenses? Our state is putting the crunch on the budget, something that I think all of us are feeling, but more because lawmakers, I think, are really trying to put some pressure on agencies to justify the amount of money they need. Yet at the same time, we're protecting one of our two most bloated areas, education and Medicaid. Medicaid will probably be getting some cuts because it's not an exemption in this, but its spending has grown to over $5 billion annually, with the state costs reaching $1.8 billion. That's its own interesting thing with Medicaid and federal. But if we're looking at the other side of the aisle, which is no stranger to spending money, Democrats predictably criticized the cuts, calling to repeal the new $50 million private school tax credit instead. A tax credit, we will remind you, that doesn't add to the budget and may spend taxpayer money more effectively. It just took a little bit from public schools, so not spending any more. And also when you have a couple $1 billion, maybe it's better to go off that. I don't know, I digress. But if we're being serious about fiscal responsibility, we need to examine where our money actually goes, not just trimming around the edges while protecting the biggest spending categories. Little says it's in, quote, our DNA, end quote, to balance budgets. But cuts around the edges won't solve the root of overspending. Don't want to miss out on learning more about Idaho? If so, make sure to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss any of our future content. And staying in Boise, and with a topic that viewers have reached out and let us know to cover, a Saturday or two ago, it's a little bit in the rear, but we wanted to still get to it. On the 10th, dozens of Shia Muslims walked through Boise streets in their annual Arbeen March, starting at Ann Morrison Park and ending at the Imam Hussein Islamic Center on Orchard Street. This marks the 5th year local Shias have held this public event. Now, many of us are Americans, so we won't know what exactly this is. So looking at the history, it commemorates the 40th day after Ashur, when Shia Muslims remember Imam Hussein's death at the Battle of Karbala in 680 AD. If I got any of those words wrong, I'm sorry, I'm an American. This event split Islam into Shia and Sunni branches. Those are words I can use. While 20 million people make a pilgrimage to Iraq annually, Boise's march represents a much smaller local expression of it. The march proceeded peacefully, with participants carrying flags and signs. Organizers from past events say they want to show the peaceful side of Islam and counter negative perceptions. However, when the news of the march spread on social media, and this is where our wonderful viewers let us know, some raised concerns about the growing Islamic influence in Idaho. Critics point to examples from Europe and Michigan, where large Muslim populations have established separate legal systems almost, and cultural practices alongside existing laws. Weird when you have your own sovereign country? With Idaho hosting only about 2,500 Muslims statewide, these marches represent a teeny fraction of our population. While we should welcome those who genuinely want to become Americans, we must stay vigilant about preserving the Christian cultural foundations that made Idaho what it is. True tolerance doesn't mean surrendering our heritage to accommodate belief systems that would eliminate such tolerances once they gain power. And speaking of a much more American thing, the U.S. Senate, they can do things from rare time to time. Our Senator Jim Risch has teamed up with Kentucky's Rand Paul to introduce the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, or better known as it's being reported on, Audit the Fed. The bill would force the Governmental Accountability Office to conduct a complete audit of the Federal Reserve within 1 year, reporting back to Congress within 90 days. Risch says Idahoans deserve to know what the Fed does to our economy, calling it time to, quote, pull back the curtain on this unselected Washington establishment, end quote. The audit would examine the Fed's monetary policy decisions, international transactions, and secret federal open market committee meetings. Kind of weird if it's open market, but it's secret. Maybe that has something to do to nod to free markets? I don't know. But this isn't new territory if you've been watching the U.S. Senate and this topic. Similar bills have been introduced since 2009, typically passing the House, but dying in the Senate. The pattern suggests tough odds ahead, especially with concerns that the audit could politicize monetary policy. But the bigger thing that comes out of this is why now and why try again? Well, the Fed wields enormous power over our savings, if you didn't know, and the economic future of the country, yet operates with little oversight compared to many of the other branches, the executive, legislative, and judicial. Recent Fed losses are estimated to have cost taxpayers around $1.6 trillion. So we went from million, we went to billion, and now we're to trillion. Yet, with that huge price tag, they face no requirements to justify these costs to Congress. Several Republican senators have joined Risch and Paul, but without broader bipartisan support, this bill probably will face the same Senate roadblock that has killed previous attempts. Still, Risch believes transparency matters more than protecting an institution that affects every Idaho family's financial future. Which, if you would like that bill to pass and are liking the midweek report, do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe/follow button. It helps us stay connected with you and reach more folks who love Idaho just like yourself. And then heading over to Meridian, that loves its California, especially with all the people from California that moved there, its second In-N-Out location hit another roadblock. The city council pushed their decision to September, citing paperwork issues. This comes after the Planning and Zoning Commission denied In-N-Out's permit back in April by a 4-1 vote. The proposed location at 10 Mile Road and Chinden Boulevard faces opposition due to traffic concerns and its proximity to residential areas. This is a story we've previously reported on if you check out our Substack. In-N-Out has cut their operating hours on their new proposal to midnight daily instead of the original 1 a.m. on weekdays and 1:30 a.m. on weekends. The company also highlights that their 2.22-acre site is larger than typical locations. As for public opinion, which was the biggest factor, I think, in affecting this so far, it remains split. Local resident Ty told reporters he supported whatever happens, noting that growth brings challenges, but businesses will come regardless, so a very apathetic view. However, some neighbors worry about increased traffic, though, the already busy streets, and the late-night noise disrupting families. The debate connects to the rapid growth that the Treasure Valley has seen, especially and most acutely there in Meridian. Leaders there have had to balance between economic development and quality of life, their roads being a perfect example of that. City officials must weigh job creation and tax revenue against legitimate local concerns, because, that's their constituents. The council will make their final decision on September 9th at the meeting at 6 p.m. If you're interested, make sure to put that on your calendar. Residents can attend or submit public comments through the city's hearing process. This decision will set a precedent for how Meridian handles future commercial developments in residential areas. And going from Meridian up to the skies into something that delivers a less tasty thing, our beloved A-10 Warthogs has flown its final mission over Boise. After nearly 3 decades protecting ours and other skies since the 1960s, the 190th Fighter Squadron at Gowan Field said goodbye to these iconic aircraft this year. The A-10, for anyone that isn't a super aircraft nerd or a guy, I think most guys might know this, I don't know, comment down below if you do, has earned respect for good reason, mainly due to its infamous 30mm Gatling gun that shredded tanks, and the plane that could seriously take damage and keep flying. There are some really crazy stories about that. Pilots and ground troops trust it completely during close air support missions because of that. But the Air Force decided that these tough birds can't survive against modern threats like China or Russia. They're very good against other things. Those guided missiles and advanced radar systems would make them easy targets. They're shifting to F-35s and F-16s that can handle multiple missions and evade detection. But there is a uranium-tipped lining for this story. One A-10 won't end up in Arizona's infamous aircraft boneyard. The Warhawk Museum in Nampa will display serial number 780627 as the centerpiece of their Global War on Terror exhibit. They'll remove the gun system first, which represents quite a challenge if you understand how the engineers built the entire aircraft around the weapon. It was a funny way they did that. This A-10 will honor everyone who's served since 9/11, keeping our connection to these legendary aircraft alive for future generations to appreciate. Has the show been valuable for you? If so, don't hesitate to share it. Your shares help us keep you and others informed about what is happening in Idaho. And going from fire from above to fire here in our forests, the one place we don't want it, 2 major wildfires are testing Idaho firefighter crews this week. Near Tamarack Resort, lightning sparked 3 fires last Tuesday night, the Rock, Lone Tree, and Duck fires. These blazes have burned roughly 1,000 acres, about a 1.5 miles south of the resort. Firefighters deployed immediately with 100 personnel and nearly 20 aircraft, but as of recording, haven't been able to contain the fires yet. Resort officials closed operations last Wednesday and turned on snow guns to wet down vegetation to hopefully slow it getting anywhere near the resort. Up north, though, the Sunset Fire has exploded from half an acre on the evening of the 13th to over 2,700 acres. This particular fire is burning in heavy timber along Lake Penderay near Athol. Crews have about 295 people fighting this blaze, and evacuations keep expanding. Some residents are facing go orders, meaning leave immediately, while others remain on set status. You can probably guess what that means. Both fires remind us how quickly conditions can change. Our firefighters are working around the clock, and we're grateful for their service on that. Weather patterns did shift recently, though, bringing moisture that helped them contain other fires that could have gotten out of hand. But dry lightning continues to spark new ones, which isn't great. Residents in affected areas should stay alert and follow evacuation guidance from local officials. And going from up north back down here to the southern part of the state, but talking about not destroying but building, Magic Valley continues to grow. And with it, that growth comes the challenge of moving people safely across the Snake River. The Idaho Transportation Department wants to build a second bridge to help relieve pressure on the iconic Perrine Bridge in Twin Falls. Over the past 20 years, the population over there has jumped nearly 40%. An ITD expects another 37,000 people to call that area home by 2050. That growth does add some strain to the current bridge system, especially during peak travel times. ITD has studied 4 potential locations for this new crossing. True routes would start near Jerome and cross west of Twin Falls, requiring 1,400-foot bridges. The other 2 options sit closer to Twin Falls itself and would need about 1,500-foot spans. The department is considering several bridge designs, from suspension bridges to cable-stayed constructions. They want your input, though, before they move forward with the environmental study, which will take until 2028. Crazy thing is that's going to sneak up on us fast. After that, they'll be seeking federal funding to actually build the bridge, because, that's how we do things. This project represents wise stewardship of our infrastructure, planning ahead to serve the growing Magic Valley while preserving the safety and mobility that helps Idahoans thrive. And hopefully, this midweek report has helped you thrive as well with the information we've given you, because sadly, it's the end. Thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you liked the midweek report, make sure to check out our other content on our Substack, where we report on more than we can fit in the midweek report. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or by tweeting us on Twitter at LocalYokelIdaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.